Hi guys, just wanted to go through a quick sort of budget build guide for Valby. So one's going to be a build that uses either one activator or two catalysts, you can sort of choose, and that'll be for Ultimate Valby. I'll also go through a bossing build for Ultimate Valby that won't use any catalyst and won't use any activators. I'll then also go through a even cheaper version for farming that uses no catalyst or activators for Ultimate Valby. And then I'll also go through a sort of standard Valby build that again uses no catalysts or activators. So pretty much I mostly see Valby as an alternative option to Bunny when it comes to farming, and in some cases she can be better than Bunny for farming. Her strength isn't really in bossing, although with one of her Transcendent mods she can actually be a pretty solid option, and so the main focus of sort of the build is going to be around using her abilities, and just because I also think that's just a bit more of a fun way to play her really. She's sort of a very ability based character, and I don't really want to turn her into just a sort of pure gun related character. And so getting into the build, this first page that I'm showing you, this is either going to take one activator to get this or two catalysts. So Ultimate Valby comes as standard with these four catalysts sort of pre-installed, so the two J's as I'll call them, an X and then a knuckle. So you've got sort of the different options. If you decide to put on two catalysts, you'd want to put on a C and another knuckle, and that'll take you to 58 module slots out of what would be a 60 capacity. Your other option is instead to put on an activator, and that would take you to 74 out of what would then be an 80 slot capacity. So you really have the two options depending on whether you have more activators, more catalysts to spare, sort of decide how you want to do that. So in terms of the sub module, I've just gone mid-air maneuvering. Just pick what you like really. I like mid-air maneuvering just for the flexibility of the mod, but if you want something slightly cheaper, you could just go with one of the blue options. Just make sure it's sort of maxed out so that you get the most module capacity, and you can see here that I have put a catalyst on the sub module. You don't need to do that for this build, that's just something I like to do with the characters because it gives them a bit more flexibility overall. And then in terms of the Transcendent mod, you'll sort of see I haven't actually used any of the Transcendent mods for the farming build. The two main mods that people seem to be sort of discussing for Ultimate Valby, or Valby in general really, is Cold Cohesion and Supply Moisture. Now, Supply Moisture I think is a very good mod, but I think it leans more into the gun related sort of build rather than the skill related build. It does give you some benefits for skill like crit hit rate, but to be honest, when it comes to Valby and a farming related build, you don't really need crit. You can get away without crit, and I've sort of said this in another build, I think if you're going crit you need to sort of heavily invest into it, and so a budget build leans more into not going crit, and so for me I just didn't see the point in putting Supply Moisture on this build. But if you decide that Supply Moisture is something you want on your farming build, it's not too hard to slot in. So for this example you can see we're only on 58 module capacity of what would be a 60 mod capacity if you're just doing two catalysts, and so you could add on Supply Moisture, and then all you'd need to do is reduce one of your other mods by sort of 2 levels, so it's not hard to slot in. It just, for me, I didn't sort of see the value in it and would prefer to use these other mods. In terms of Cold Cohesion, I'm not a big fan of it for farming. It's a fun mod, but Valby's strength is for farming, it comes from the puddles that she leaves behind, and this stops, so you can sort of see leaps forward without creating a puddle, and so you're sort of losing a lot of Valby's ability to farm, and so that's sort of why I haven't gone for this mod for this build. So in terms of the rest of the mods, you've got HP amplification. You can just use a sort of increased HP mod if you prefer. It doesn't really change too much. It's 218.5% versus 227.2, so not a massive difference. I just happen to have amplification upgraded, and I don't really mind losing some shield since this character isn't using shields particularly. MP collector, as with pretty much all farming builds where they use their abilities for the majority of the farming, MP collector is just great. You can't really go wrong with it, and since Ultimate Valby comes with a pre-installed sort of X catalyst slot, it's just a perfect mod to put into that. And then the other two mods are Focus on Non-Attribute and Focus on Dimension, and that's just simply Ultimate Valby uses non-attribute as all the skills, and the two main skills you're going to be using are Dimension, so her second and third ability. This also gives you some cooldown, which is nice to have, so you can spam her abilities more, and it also gives you a nice mix between skill power modifier and just overall skill power. So the general rule of thumb is if a skill is under 100% skill power, you want to use modifier, whereas above it you want to use just general skill power. And so having a nice mix sort of works out nicely because it's going to buff up her puddles quite a bit. And then in terms of the other mods, so you've got skill expansion, and that's just mostly to make her puddles reach more range, so you don't have to sort of go back and forth on yourself as much when sort of farming. Skill extension, pretty much the same as range, it allows your puddles to last for longer, so you again don't need to be going back and forth and sort of going over them multiple times. And then Nimble Fingers, it just sort of goes nicely along with Focus on Dimension and Focus on that attribute, and to give you a little bit more cooldown, so you can just keep spamming your abilities. Now, in terms of the cheaper version for the Ultimate Valby, and this doesn't use any catalyst and doesn't use any activator, you're going to continue to make the most of the 4 pre-install catalysts. So you've got MP Collector, still same reason as for the other build, just great to keep your MP up. Focus on Dimension, and the reason why I've done Focus on Dimension rather than Focus on non-attribute is again going back to that skill power modifier versus skill power. All in all, Ultimate Valby, her puddles benefit more from skill power modifier since they are quite a low base skill power, and so you want to use Focus on Dimension before you want to use Focus on non-attribute. Skill expansion and skill extension you'll keep still, just to sort of buff up your puddles as already explained. Nimble Fingers again, just so you can keep spamming your abilities, and then HP amplification. Same as with the other builds, you can just use increased HP if that's something you got built up already. So in terms of bossing, you also don't need to use activator or any catalyst if you don't want to. Really, when it comes to Ultimate Valby and bossing, her skills aren't really what do the damage for you. It really is going to be your gun alongside the Supply Moisture mod. Because this mod, as you can sort of see here, it increases your firearm crit hit rate, so you're pretty much are just relying on your weapon. And I'll go sort of through the different options for weapons in a moment, and so the rest of the mods are just leaning into tankiness. So you're going to have whatever resistance mod that you need, sort of depending on what boss you're fighting, and it's going to be increased HP, or of course HP amplification. Time disruption, that's just more HP. Increased defense, pretty self-explanatory. And then HP collector, that's just to keep you topped up throughout the fight. So as mentioned, the guns, realistically you have a lot of options, but you want to sort of lean into a gun that relies on crit more than weak point. So an example is the newest gun, the Peacemaker. This gun is sort of, 50% crit rates by default, and there's really good crit hit damage as well. So this works with both the farming and the bossing build really. It's not the best bossing weapon, I'd say more pick this for a bit of fun. But it also does nicely synergize, since his power is when using a dimension skill grants a unique ability, single reload per piece. And again, Valby's second and third ability, they're both dimension, and that's what you're going to be using mostly for the farming. And other good options is something like the Enduring Legacy. This is sort of the new gun that everyone's talking about. This just works so well when it comes to crit. And so it's going to work perfectly with the Supply Moisture mod. You can't really go wrong with it. But as mentioned, you can really use whatever gun you've got built up already. Just make sure it's a gun that uses crit rather than something like weak point. And in terms of your farming build, you're not really going to be using the gun very much at all. You're going to be just using your abilities. But if you do end up needing a gun, Peacemaker's probably the fun option. That does have very good synergy, but you can never go wrong with a Thunder Cage when it comes to sort of mobbing. In terms of your reactor, you're going to want to have a materialized phase reactor, so non-attribute and dimension. And then for the secondary stats, you've got quite a few options. You can go for non-attribute, you could go for dimension, range, cooldown, cost. The only things I'd probably not go for is sort of crit related, since you're not going to be building crit at all for your skills. So yeah, just anything but crit basically. And in terms of your external component, since Valby is sort of primarily for farming, I'd say you're going to want to have a farming related external component set. So I do have a video sort of breaking down what that means, sort of what exactly you want, but the short version is for your auxiliary power you'd want module and Kuiper drop increase. For your sensor you'd want character XP and consumable drop increase. For your shield, gold drop and firearm proficiency. And then for your processor it would be equipment drop, and that would be purely for the farming stuff. In terms of your bossing, I'd say just go with whatever your general tanky set is, so tanky being HP, defense and resistances. And in terms of standard Valby, as mentioned, this is sort of a build not using any catalyst or any activators. You're just using the pre-installed catalysts for Valby. So you'll go with whatever sub-module you want again. You'll go increased HP for some survivability. You'll go focus on dimension, again focus on dimension rather than focus on attribute, because you want to primarily focus on your power modifier rather than just flat skill power. Skill extension and skill expansion, just to increase the effectiveness of your puddles, and then Nimble Fingers for a little bit more cooldown. And then for the bossing setup, it's pretty similar to the previous bossing setup for Ultimate Valby. So you've got your sub-module course, you've got Supply Moisture, increased HP and increased defense, your resistance mod sort of related to whatever boss you're fighting, and then you sort of have multiple options for the last mod. I'm showing here a HP collector just because the idea would be you can keep your HP topped up by shooting the little minions that spawn in, but you could instead use something like Battle of Stamina for a bit more HP, and that little bit of extra skill duration is going to allow your puddle to stay up for longer, sort of because you have to stand on the puddle for your Supply Moisture to work. You could use something like Spear and Shield for a little bit more defense. Pretty much it could be any sort of survival related mod, because all Valby is really doing as a Descendant in the boss sort of intercept battles is just surviving and standing on a puddle to activate that supply moisture, again, you are really relying on your gun when it comes to intercept battles. So yeah, that's it really in terms of sort of the budget build. The only thing I'll say is really, you might notice I've started investing more catalysts into Ultimate Valby, but sort of by playing more with it, I realised you don't really need a maxed out catalyst Valby, in my opinion, for her to do what you need it to do, because when it comes to bossing, all you need is a few survival mods and you're just going to be standing on a pool the whole time that you're sort of shooting the boss. And for farming, you just don't need a lot of mods for farming to make it work. Crit builds I wasn't really too impressed with. It's quite a heavy investment to get your crit to a level where it makes sense to do it instead of just skill power. And really, for the most part, I prefer to save those catalysts for a different Descendant or some of my weapons. But all in all, Ultimate Valby is a very fun character to play and a very nice alternative if you're sort of bored of farming with Bunny, really. So yeah, I hope that helps. Thanks.